Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to our speaker series, our winter speaker series, but now our spring speaker series. My name is Robin Landau, and I'm the Director of Programs and Development at Voices of Hope. I am honored to introduce tonight's speaker, Dr. Ewa Callahan. Ewa is an Associate Professor of Communications at Quinnipiac University, where she teaches a course on the Holocaust in film, which will be the focus of tonight's conversation. She was born and raised in Poland and has had the opportunity to coordinate and lead trips to her home country with her students and to visit sites significant to the Holocaust and Jewish life. After her presentation, we will have a little time for questions. If you have a question, please send it directly to me, Robin Landau, through the chat function. And now please join me in welcoming Dr. Ewa Callahan. So thank you. So Ewa, thank you so much for being here tonight. I wanted to start by just hearing a little bit about your background and how you became interested in this subject.
First, thank you for having me here. I am very glad to come. As Robin said, I was born in Poland and raised in Poland, educated in Poland, and I came to States when I was about 25 years old. And my background actually started with history. My first degree in Poland was in history. However, I concentrated at this time on economic history and statistics and demography. And I studied a little bit of Polish and Jewish relations, especially in Lemberg. It is or Lvov. It's a city currently in Ukraine at this time. It was part what we considered Poland. But history was something which I didn't pursue later on. I started getting interested in the internet and all it has offer. I finished my studies in information science. And when I came to Quinnipiac, I started having classes with international approach. I started organizing classes that would travel abroad. And of course, Poland was one of the easy choices. My first class was on the topics of meanings of freedom, which started with the idea of Roosevelt's speech and different types of freedom, freedom of religion, freedom of speech, economic freedom, freedom from fear. And kind of led me to designing a class which traveled to Poland and Czech Republic. And we visited Krakow and Prague. And of course, when we were talking about freedom of religion and freedom from fear, which talk about a lot of the concentration was on the World War II, obviously we were traveling to places related to Holocaust. And as it turned out, this part of the course was which stuck with students the most. So I redesigned the class into being about Holocaust and added Germany to that part. And it slowly developed into a class which was much more coherent and on a specific topic which was meaningful to the students. Additionally, my husband also is historian and teaches at University of St. Joseph history classes, including Holocaust and film. Me being in the communication class, doing studies in also film in graphic design, led to teaching about Holocaust itself through the film lens.
Great, thank you. So growing up, you said you came here when you were 25. So when you were growing up in Poland, what kind of education did you have about the Holocaust under communism?
It's a very interesting question because as we had the conversations, I learned the word Holocaust in my college education, during my college degree. It was because the Holocaust education in Poland at that time, when I was growing up, I was born in '68 and going into school in '70s. Mostly the Holocaust was not, there was no discussions of Holocaust. The war was positioned as a, some kind of development of capitalism, which, you know, now we have this communist great time, and which is the time of peace, and war is a thing of the past. And the focus on teaching about the World War II was on the fighting of the Nazi regime. There were statements that 6 million Poles died during the Holocaust, and it was not really specified that majority of them were of Jewish ethnicity and religion. It was just always talked about Poles. There was, of course, teaching about Jews. So we would read books about, you know, Poles hiding Jewish children, or story about the Jewish child who was in hiding. Later in high school, we would have a book, well-known book about, I think the English title is Smoke over Birkenau, of a Polish survivor of concentration camp. And so this wasn't we knew about Jews and during the war and their suffering, but it wasn't big emphasis of teaching during the times of the communism when I went to school.
So how old were you? You said you were in college when you first heard the word Holocaust, and was that shocking to you? It was
actually, it was, I was with a friend who, and we were copying the book because there was only one book and it was book, I believe, on either European or Polish history, and we were copying some parts, and the word Holocaust came in, and I was a little confused. I didn't want to ask her not to look, you know, silly that I don't know something she does. And so I went to the dictionary and read what it meant. And of course, later on in life, this was a word which I knew and understood meaning quite well.
Yeah. Do you think that growing up in Poland and being taught the way, being educated about World War II the way you were, and then learning about it differently later, do you think that impacted you at all in wanting to teach about the Holocaust?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that, as you are growing and become more, your learning shifts from, yes, okay, I will learn what they are telling me and what is a sign, to the self-exploration and learning and finding out that what you are learning in school, it's a small part. You have to go outside of this, and developing the critical lens, developing the exploration lens, it's very important. And this is something which I am hoping that through my classes I will install in my students, that they are going and whatever they are looking at, even if this is a movie, if this is a literature, if this is a piece of article they read in the press or something they seen in TV, they are going further and they are examining it and looking it in context, and also with very critical approach on that. So that was a big part of what really is driving part of why I'm teaching this course is the students. They are coming in and they are asking questions. They are sometimes posing and thinking, I never thought about it that way. And now on the one hand, I feel, yes, I can guide you through the questions, but also I don't know all the answers. Let's look for them together and see how we can look at it from the much more complex way than just historical points on this date something happened, and on that date something happened and had consequences.
So overall, how do you think that your students are impacted by the subject and in the manner that you teach it? I know you had said when we were talking before that maybe you could talk a little bit about how you decide what topics you're going to teach and how you speak about it. I thought that was interesting.
I see some students in the audience. They may say, "How are they impacted by that? How do I choose the subjects?" One of the things, because it's a class, Holocaust and film, I have, and this is a class which is taught for anyone at the university. It's not directed for the film students. It's a university curriculum class. Additionally, it's an elective class, which means that I have flexibility with the topic and how I incorporated it. So I teach it from the perspective when I can include elements of psychology, sociology, history, film, literary criticism. Any of those can be included. I start always my classes with asking the students to give me 3 questions they want this class to answer. And because of that, I try to steer the rest of our conversations around those questions. And throughout the year, the questions can be different. They are questions, and I especially look, because they can be 2 different types of questions. One which relates to Holocaust and one which relates to film, in case I have more film students. And with Holocaust, that very often there are questions of how the world didn't know that it was happening when it was happening. Why nobody was doing, or why there was so little done about it. And they may be film questions. What are the director's responsibility of doing films about Holocaust? How do they prepare and how do they research that? So depending on what the questions are asked, I have a skeleton of the syllabus, but when we are discussing every unit in history and every film, we are also using the lens of those questions to make sure, because I always believe in teaching what is relevant to students. Mm-hmm. What is their interest? Why do they sign up for this class? Was it because they are grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, because they're Jewish themselves, because they're interested in the topic, because they watched Anne Frank 10 years ago and would like to know more, or because it was class in the time they fit and they just sign up for it? And so I'm trying to actually cater to all of them. You know, how successful I am, I hope I'm quite successful. Some show up today, so I'm yes, of my past ones, so I think they are still interested in the topic and would like to explore it further beyond my 14 weeks exploration.
I want to talk a little bit more about your students and their reactions, but I want to take a step back and ask one last question about Poland and maybe what it's like today. Are you aware of how the Holocaust education or World War II education has changed in Poland since communism has ended?
It did change. It's definitely changed, although it was a slow change. First of all, now we are having teachers who grew up like me, who were not educated in Holocaust education, who are now going to teach it. Mm-hmm. And there is not really a big complex training system of how to teach Holocaust. Additionally, you have to remember that Poland, especially right now, is a very nationalistic country. So the Holocaust education moved a little bit from, being swept under the rug into that it's a Polish and Jewish suffering in during the Holocaust. There are, so in 2003, so it's quite recent, in 2003, we started having Holocaust units in the curriculum. In 2009, it was first time when they started putting it in all state mandated teachings. So it's taught twice. There are many school reforms in Poland, so I don't know the exact dates, but it's taught at the end of the middle school and at the end of the high school. Additionally, what is happening right now is that there are many of organizations who are promoting the teaching and learning about Holocaust, and they are promoting also Jewish culture, which I find it's quite important for understanding Holocaust and understanding relations between Poles and Jews so some of you may be aware of the Museum Polin in Warsaw, a huge museum and very, very interestingly done. I still kind of think that I would make it more Jewish, because when I looked at it, I thought it's still Polish history with at some parts in Judaism added to it, but it's a huge step for students to be brought in and taught about the culture, about the relationships over almost 1,000 years and connections, and because this is also another part which is much easier to do in the travel when you are traveling to Poland, Czech Republic, going through Krakow, the Jewish quarter, not necessarily Jewish ghetto, but Jewish quarter, which has a number of synagogues, still the relics of the market, mikvah, and other parts in this town. Then going to Prague, when you have another 7 synagogues turn into museum where you can go over and teach about Jewish culture. And actually, this is interesting. I'm not always the one who is doing the teaching, because I will have Jewish students on in my classes, and they would be very willing to share their knowledge with their classmates. So.
Right. So can you talk a little bit about the travel component, and is that a requirement in the class, and what exactly? I know you said the Jewish culture part, and why that's so important to include in the course.
Actually, it's quite interesting, because as I'm teaching, and anybody who is educator knows that your idea of teaching particular class changes as you go, as you learn more from your students, and from the content of the class. So our classes were traveled. So we had a class in the classroom for several weeks to kind of learn about what we will be seeing during the travel. And then we go for 2 weeks to Poland, Czech Republic, and Germany. We come to Krakow, where we have in the Schindler's footsteps, we go to Jewish quarter, Jewish ghetto, Schindler's List factory. Then we go to Auschwitz. After that, we move to Prague and visit the Jewish town in Prague. We visit the church, I forgot the name of it. Not a synagogue, the Greek Orthodox church, and We also go to Theresienstadt. Have spent all day there doing the exploration of both the ghetto and the fortress. After that, we move to Nuremberg, where we go and study at Nazi party grounds and visit the Palace of Justice and have a lesson there on the Nuremberg trials. And we conclude in Berlin and going to places in Berlin and visit the monument for murdered Jews of Europe. So what I'm trying to do before we actually go to that student have a solid knowledge of the Holocaust. But as we are traveling through those Holocaust sites, we are also teaching, I'm also trying to teach the culture and what is important. Because if you teach Holocaust just as a Holocaust, it portrays Jews as only from the lens of victims. And students kind of have, especially the ones who are just in the class for the content of thinking, may not make the connections of that it's a civilization. Yesterday, actually, it happened. We were following on Shoah and reading a critical review of Shoah, and somebody pointed the word civilization and thinking about a huge group of or a big rich culture, thinking about it, that usually we are just saying the words and not always think about of the hundreds years of what was happening before. And it also goes to beginning of my classes when I start with anti-Semitism. You cannot teach anti-Semitism without explaining the culture, because it brings all those stereotypes, and you're thinking, why shouldn't we using them? Why shouldn't we think about them that way? Again, a student said, well, I always thought about this way and I never questioned it. And so those are the moments when I'm like, yes, you got it. Right. Now you are questioning it. That's the point I'm trying to make. Question it. Just don't observe. Just don't see everything you see in the media and go without questioning. Now you question it. Right. Now you are learning the history. Now you are going back. So.
Right. What do you have any favorite films that you use?
It's always hard to say favorite film about Holocaust.
Correct. Correct.
The thing I think that I find Shoah extremely moving. So I will use two different type of movies. Shoah is extremely moving to me, and one of the things that it's difficult to do it right now in the pandemic. I would rather show pieces of Shoah and have the discussion, piece and have the discussion. Right now in the pandemic, I just cannot do it with the Zoom card and Zoom and all those, having half of the students in the classroom and half of the students on Zoom. And it's always important for me to have the discussion right after the film happens. So this is one of the films which I would include in every single class I teach. I change films slightly from class to class. A lot of it is motivated how easily students can get the film. Unfortunately, some good films are not as easily to be found. There are two other movies which are more not a documentaries, but more of a docudrama type. Is Conspiracy. I find it extremely important to, and especially if we find the Wannsee protocol, so examining when the students are questioned, how did the director learn about how to make the film? Here is, I have the Wannsee protocol and how I have, so we can examine the protocol, we can examine how the film was made. And of course, there is a content of the film, which requires a lot of preparation, talking about the Nuremberg laws, talking about the consequences of Wannsee conference. And the next step is we are actually going to Wannsee Villa. And once again, talking about final solution and how it was created in this, or discussed in this beautiful villa over the hors d'oeuvres, and we are actually standing in that room and, you know, looking at the beautiful lake, and just cannot comprehend in this moment even more how, you know, 15 men could sit in the room and discuss it, final solution in that way. So those are other one which I particularly is a Sobibor. One or the other. I actually, it was another surprise from my students. I assigned the newest 2018 Sobibor, and students told me how gruesome it was. And it was, and to me, it was a wake up, because I have seen a number of Holocaust movies. Of course, I saw it as gruesome, but I didn't expect that such an effect on the students. So right now I allow them to choose between one and the other, and I provide explanation because I again find this movie quite important.
Do you, how do you handle, or do you show only, you know, these motion pictures, or do you show any of the films that the Nazis themselves used?
I show a huge variety of pictures. So I will show a propaganda movies. Ewige Jew is one of them. One of the important part of this also is that I will not send students to online show. It's behind the closed doors. We have to discuss it. We have to discuss it right there and in the classroom. I show Triumph of the Will, parts of it, showing the whole demonstration of power, showing Hitler as he wanted to be portrayed, and having discussions of, you know, of images, national symbols, party symbols, all those things, and how do they perpetrate the whole idea of Nazism. I show documentaries, as I mentioned. From the propaganda movies, I also show the movie shot in Terezin, to portray the camp as this beautiful place with soccer games and violin playing and children having a playground and all of those. Also with a discussion and a commentary. So those are the propaganda documentaries, docudramas, and also films, you know, popular films like, you know, Schindler's List or even Jojo Rabbit, keeping it on all in perspective and trying to find out what are the specific elements we would specifically discuss in the context.
Right. And that actually leads really nicely to my next question, which you mentioned was one of the questions your students have. In your opinion, do you think these filmmakers have what kind of responsibility do they have when they make these films about the Holocaust?
And interestingly, this is a question that students are questioning and bringing into the idea of, you know, we discuss about things about, you know, blockbusters movies, whom do they benefit? and we are discussing the ideas of storytelling. Again, I am always just so happy when the students saying, okay, how it is historically correct, let's go and check. I'm like, always do that, always find out what parts are historically accurate and what are the imagination of the director. And one of the things is, I think that most important is that the director communicates well with the audience of what is the goal of the film. And one of the things is, there are a number of films which have been quite popular. Even Schindler's List have a number of critics, depending on what, on the one hand, huge, very popular movie, but it also has its criticism. So we are trying to look, whenever we are looking at any movie, it's finding movie reviews, because they are easy for students to relate to and to read and see which ones, which critique would they agree with.
Right. Yeah. And you also mentioned that you sometimes watch Jojo Rabbit, which is a relatively new movie, and I'm curious how you view that movie and its role and its position in the overall world of movies of this genre.
I view it from the perspective of the class, rather than from the perspective of genre and movies, because I think that and we have this discussion in class, if somebody just view a Jojo Rabbit, it's a huge, they would get a very distorted view of the era and so on. But in the classroom, we can have a connection, we can bring a connection, and especially students are through the years of schooling. Compare and contrast is a technique they very well, they used very well. So films like Jojo Rabbit can be compared, or characters in it can be compared and contrasted, and thinking about, okay, what would happen? What if we, let's say, take the satire out of it and see the characters? How would you see them? It introduces the discussions of those type. I wouldn't show it as a standalone film. It wouldn't fit the realm, but it would, when we are, and I cannot show every, only the whole, only the movies which are taking place in the camps, because the students again wouldn't have the critical approach and thinking about what we show in the films, what we show in newsreels, what we show in the all the other media relating to the topic.
Have there been any movies that have been released that you would not show, or feel do a disservice to Holocaust education in general?
I think about the movies I would like to include, rather than the movies I would like to exclude, because again, it's not the movies which I'm using in my classes. We are actually using, learning history. We are getting topics from the history. So when I'm planning on my courses, I'm looking at what would do the objective of the class the best. So I don't think I had much thought of movies which I wouldn't include for a specific purpose. The only time somebody suggested Inglorious Bastards, and I was just like, no, it's not going to my class, and doesn't serve the purpose I am, or the ideas of I am trying to instill with the students.
So to talk a little bit more about the ideas that you try to instill in your students, you talked a little bit about the reason you teach and what you're hoping they achieve. Do you have any overarching goals that you would like to see them leave the class having accomplished?
Empathy and a lack of indifference. I think that this is, we start, when we are talking about all those topics, it's very easy to think about it from the perspective of history. And again, you asked me about sometimes, memorable thing about students. Somebody taught yesterday, pointed something they read actually, that the Holocaust was not only a thing of the past, it's a thing of the present, of lack of the people we could have had. And it was, this was the fragment they found in the readings, but this was something the most memorable to them. We discuss, the typical educational tools like pyramid of hate, and I want them to understand that it's not okay to be at any part of it. But additionally, that the indifference is also not a part we should be, also is not a place we would like to be in. The other part of this is the historical one. I think that Holocaust, as you are hearing, less and less people, teenagers, less Americans as well in US know about Holocaust. And I remember this was also very interesting part that about the World War II, when the Schindler's List came in, and people the first time heard about the gas chambers. It was a huge shock to me because I heard them since I was 10, despite of the lack of, emphasis on Holocaust in Poland. So I think that it's incredibly important to teach the history.
Okay. Can you share? I mean, that was an amazing story that you share. I mean, that's just something that really sticks with you. I'm sure when a student says something like, "What about all of the people that could have been here and what we've lost that way?" Do you have any? Can you tell us a little bit about some of the other reactions that have stayed with you that your students have had?
They are, as I said, the one previous one was the one with stereotypes, which was very very telling. There are also reactions from the trips, as once we were traveling and students was sitting right next to somebody and they struck the conversation. It turned out the lady who was she was talking with was a Holocaust survivor. And I didn't know to the end of the travel from Poland to US. And when we got up, this girl was totally shaken and said, she was telling me all the stories because she asked, what did we do in Poland? And I told her that we are taking the class, and she didn't mind to share the story. And so the students that, it would be nice we knew before, but it was, we are on the carousel, and she's so excited to retell the yet another experience she had in the travel. interestingly, some students, the travel is a big component of the also of the classes. I always, whenever we go to Auschwitz, it's very interesting to see how the students change that day. We go and it's morning, they just had breakfast and are bouncing, you know, listening to the music. They're going, you know, they know where they're going, but they're still kind of pumped up there. And then we come there and we come back and it's an hour trip. It's a total silence every single time. And just, and I never schedule anything else for that day. I let them kind of all the things sink in, and then we are having a discussion at the end of the day. I usually, as I was telling Robin, I usually do not go to Auschwitz with the students. I either send them with a chaperone, or if I do, I come in and wait outside of the gates on the bench. Simply because I have visited Auschwitz probably 3 times. I don't want it. I do the trips almost every year. I don't want it to become a casual visit. I don't want it to be something which I'm routinely doing, you know, throughout my life. So I want the previous feelings and understanding and whatever is in me stay with me and not become the routine. So yeah.
We are getting a ton of questions, so I'm going to start at the top and bear with me for a minute. Oops. We have someone who said that she just finished the book, The Stone Crusher, which is a true story about a father and son who survived the concentration camps. Do you ever include books to read as supplements?
The full books are very rarely, because it's very difficult to add to already quite full curriculum, because if we have travel, if we have films, if we have criticism, if we have readings. Right. However, I do include a book on which is a memoir, and there are actually 2. One is Somebody Made Mistake, and that's the title, and it's a book about a girl from Theresienstadt who survived the Theresienstadt. The other one is also a memoir. So there are 2 different memoirs from Theresienstadt. I thought that it was quite good connection to, usually they know Anne Frank. So they can kind of make a connection between young girl, you know, from the one type of diary and the other type of diary. But it's very hard to include additional books to this. But sometimes I will bring excerpts of Maus. It depends all how it fits with the class. I read poetry for the students. I try to have now. I started to having every couple classes a poetry relating to the topic of the unit. Yeah.
Okay. We have someone asking for us, and if with your permission, to provide a list of all of the movies that you've spoken about.
Sure.
And okay, so the answer, that's an easy one. We will get that out to everybody. Mark Oland asks, are there any films that depict how the United States responded or did not respond to what Hitler was doing?
That's a good question. I'm sure that there is one about the ship not being accepted into the U.S. They are also right now. I'm very much excited to look into a play of Jan Karski, which was converted into the movie, and kind of a Polish correspondent who visited Warsaw and ghetto and was sending information about it first in Great Britain, then in US. So I'm waiting for the movie to come out. The play is already played in some theaters. So, well, when there is no pandemic.
When there's no soon, hopefully soon. Voices. This is from Paul Kornman, who explains, saying hello. I know you do theater with him. Who explains that Voices of Hope is primarily a second-generation organization. Do you see a place in your curriculum for films that focus on children of survivors in the aftermath of war, as opposed to their parents' experiences during the war?
Actually, this is a very good question, and this is a movie which I would like to include in my curriculum, and I have seen once, and I know it came from Voices of Hope. It's a story about children of survivors and children of German survivors of the Nazi coming in together in Nuremberg.
Oh, wow.
So that's the movie I would like to show to my class one time. One of the assignments which I'm doing for my students is that they have to interview older generations, and some of them are either grandchildren of survivors, or grandchildren of German citizens, and it's very interesting to see how this assignments come together when we are talking about, other generations. That's one of the assignments, is generation piece, that they have to either interview or interview their parents or grandparents about how do they learn about Holocaust.
Paul says, do you have any tips for educators who want to begin incorporating film into their curriculum?
Yes, I would. It depends if they want to have a class about film in the curriculum, or I would start with the documentaries.
Okay.
Simply because they are the closest to the actual truth, and they can provide anything which includes the testimonies, anything which includes history. I find the most valuable in it. But again, with the educators, always question of what type of classes do you teach? Are there Holocaust classes? Then it's probably you are more, if you are purely teaching Holocaust classes, you are probably more educated in this topic than I am. Variety is also, from my perspective, would be a good idea. Again, there are classes which are primary school students, not primary school, middle school students, high school students, and college students, and each of them would have an appropriate level of films. The students in my classes usually come with watching Anne Frank and Boy in Striped Pajamas. That's what they remember from the schools, and this wouldn't, especially Boy in Striped Pajamas, wouldn't be something I would pick for my class. Not because I have any objections; it more doesn't fit exactly, but it gives me a step to build upon.
I know that your semester is short and that there is a tremendous amount of material to cover. Do you ever, are you ever able to discuss any films that deal with issues about the aftermath of the Holocaust and, for example, denial?
We do. So aftermath, I didn't do denial, but it's a good suggestion in that one. In this semester, we, for example, do Accountant of Auschwitz.
Okay.
So we go into farther down. We talk. We get the Nuremberg trials. Actually, this is a topic which I spent quite big amount of time on doing documentaries and newsreels, and this is when the actual first time when movies were used, that accounts of liberating camps were used in the courtroom. So we look at it through this lens, and at the end we watch Accountant from Auschwitz, which is relatively new and and deals with the responsibility and but yes, questions actually of denial and Holocaust denial came in with when we were discussing, throughout the semester.
Okay. I will tell everyone that The Accountant of Auschwitz is available on Netflix right now, actually, if anybody is interested in watching it. This is an interesting question, given where we're at in the world right now. Given the known increase in mental health problems among students in the past few years due to both the pandemic and the political situation, have you seen any decrease in interest? Because students don't want to necessarily learn about any more sad things. And for those who do enroll, are you concerned about the topics that they're burdensome for them?
Very good question. Actually, I don't exactly know the answer to the first part, because the pandemic changed the way of how the class is run. It was done with the travel, and my last class was cut in the middle because the pandemic started and I couldn't travel anymore. And the students, as much as disappointed they were that they couldn't travel, wrote very good stuff about this class in the reviews and saying, this was very, very important to learn. So I said, well, I cannot travel, but I have to offer it to the students. And the class filled in the first day. So I don't, so I expect that there still would be interest. Actually, we are thinking about making it kind of, the travel component being a separate, so more students can attend. I think that the students actually, the ones who sign up for the classes, are at least quite resilient. And I try to balance, as the variety of films. As I said, this would be very hard to show only the films from the concentration camps and liberation. And and I also provide, when they watch something on their own, provide a warning. If there would be a students who would say, I cannot watch those films, we would find a common ground. We would find other ways to learn. So that's, but yes, I can understand it's very hard to learn and to teach Holocaust during pandemic. I can sympathize.
Yeah, we are just about out of time, and I apologize if we haven't been able to get to everyone's question. One real quick question that I hope you can answer is, again, what was the name of the second memoir from Theresienstadt?
I will provide it with the list of the films.
Okay, and we have some offers which I can get to you, of people who are wondering if you ever bring people into your class to present. So I will get those names to you as well.
I would love more. I used to bring a Holocaust survivor who is also a filmmaker, Mira Binford, who did Diamonds in the Snow. So we will watch the movie, and she can then show her stories. Yeah, but I bring, of course, next week I will have somebody who will introduce us to yet another movie. So
all right, well, I will make sure to connect the two of you offline. And I'm sorry if we weren't able to get to everybody's questions, but this was just wonderful. Thank you so much. And please,
me, and if anybody has any questions, that is my email. I would gladly get in touch with you and respond.
thank you, everyone. If you liked tonight's program and you want to see more from us, please consider making a donation on our website at www.ctvoicesofhope.org. We have a text to give number, and we're even on Venmo now. It's all good. All the information is going to be provided in the chat for you. And our next speaker coming up will be on April 26th, Monday, April 26th. It will be a nice follow-up to this. Jeffrey Simbler will be speaking at 7 p.m. and he will be talking about how to trace your genealogical roots in Poland. It will be another remarkable conversation, and we provided the registration link, will be provided in the chat. And everything that we are doing is listed on our website, which I gave you before, and again will be in the chat. So please check out all of our programs, and please follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And finally, lastly, we are doing something a little new tonight. We have a very quick poll. There's just a couple questions. It's completely optional, but we hope that you will leave us some feedback about our programming, our virtual programming, and what you would like to see from us in the future. So thank you very, very much. And Eva, thank you. It was a pleasure speaking with you.